hey, the Mets finally have a center fielder. And I don't think that there's a negative to this with Luis Robert. Obviously, the Mets making a move late Tuesday night after they announced that Bo Bichette would be introduced on Wednesday after acquiring him and stealing him away from the Phillies, and a big offseason acquisition. Well, later on, actually, not too long after that announcement, did the Mets make the trade to get Luis Robert Jr., which to me takes Cody Bellinger out of play for them. More on Bellinger and what that means for him moving forward. But let's focus on Luis Robert Jr. here, who's a legitimate center fielder, a guy who could actually run and catch the ball in the outfield, something that the Mets haven't had in quite some time. So you look at the offensive numbers, and now Robert was an all-star in 2023. The guy had 38 home runs. You look at the numbers, though, and you say, geez, he strikes out a ton. He's a 220 hitter, although he's a career 259 hitter. And obviously the power, like the appeal of Robert is that you see the 1 year, that one flash, and you think he can be this. The reality is he is not that. But it doesn't matter for the Mets because not only are you getting a legitimate defensive center fielder, even if Robert only plays 100 games or 110 games, and that's what he's played each of the last two seasons. Even 14 homers, 53 ribbies a year ago. He hit 223. The year before, 14 homers, 35 ribbies, he had 224. So you're talking about the same type thing. Also, he could steal a base. He stole 20 bases. He stole 33 last year, 23 the year before, 20 before that. Not to give you the numbers crunch, but I think with Robert, it's important because you have a player who's going to be 28 years old, who is a young player with potential and has shown the ability to be a guy that can hit 36 doubles, 38 home runs, and steal a bunch of bases. My bigger point is that the floor for Luis Robert Jr. is far better than anything the Mets have had in center field. Think about it. Jose Siri, Jeff McNeil, Tyrone Taylor. Even when Nimmo was there, they haven't had a real center fielder in forever. Harrison Bader. Would you rather have Harrison Bader? I would not. As a matter of fact, last night, I say last night, who knows when you're listening to this, but I was at SNY, I do the Baseball Night New York show 5 days a week, and then I stayed for sports, and that was my one late night there. And we did a show from 11 to 11:30, and in that live show, we were talking about the Mets and should they get Bellinger, should they get pitching, and I was saying, before the trade was announced, saying that I don't want Bellinger for the Mets, and you guys have heard me talk about this, I think. I don't want Bellinger for the Mets. Like, if they got him, would I turn him away? No, it's a fine move, and he makes the team better. I, though, would rather, and I said this exact thing last night on Sportsline, I would rather get a Luis Robert and then go get pitching, whether it's Peralta, Valdez. I still think the Mets need two arms in that starting rotation. And then minutes later, so much so we had to stay and record another show from 11:30 to 12. Minutes later, the Mets made the trade for Robert. So I think we're along the same thought process there. Maybe the Mets just got a feel that Bellinger was going to take their offer. Maybe they decided to move on immediately, but they make the trade to get a legitimate center fielder with a floor. Now, you're paying $20 million this year, great. And then they're on the hook total for $22 million. If he's a bust, he's a bust. See you later. But even if he's a bust, his floor is still better than anything that they've had. You'd actually, not that you want this to happen, you'd actually sign for 110 games with Robert defensively in center field and hitting 14 home runs and stealing 20 bases, hitting 220. That's actually not the worst thing for the Mets. It would be a significant upgrade. That's the floor. The upside is you could have a guy that could hit 25 homers. Maybe he hits 30 home runs. Maybe he comes to New York and he loves it. And him and Soto were BFFs. Who the hell knows what could happen here? But you get a guy that was an all-star, that can play gold glove defense, and is a legitimate major league bat that's going to hit at the bottom of the order. He's not going to be in the middle of the order for the Mets, obviously. Nobody would say that. I wouldn't expect him to be a high-impact bat, but he can be a significant upgrade over anything they've had. Plus, you now have one specific spot. Like, the Mets needed an outfield bat. We know that. They could have gotten all left fielder. The ideal fit would have been a center fielder, which they now did. But you have Soto in right. You have Robert in center, who, by the way, because he's a gold glove defender, should help out Soto's lack of defense in right field as well. And they have a spot for Carson Bench now in left field. And that's kind of the alignment. Now, you want to have Beatty play some big league games in left field if Benj isn't fully ready yet. But I think that's your outfield. They're pretty set. Tyrone Taylor being the fourth outfield. If they needed to add an outfielder at some point, you could always do that. It's not going to be some superstar. At least I wouldn't think early on. Maybe if that turns out to be a major need By the All-Star break, they could go do that. But this is how you build a team. Man, the Mets lineup already starting to look significantly different, which is what you love about it. It needed to be different from what it was a year ago. So I don't see a downside. What's the negative? The $22 million is not going to prevent them from going to get starting pitching. There is no downside in center field because even at his floor, at his worst years, I don't want Robert. He's a career 260 hitter. Add up the center fielders that the Mets have had since Carlos Beltran, who's now a Hall of Famer, of course. Congrats to him. Add them up. None of them compared to what Luis Robert Jr. could do. Granderson wasn't a legitimate center fielder. He was a strikeout machine. He was a 200 hitter. He had a lot of home runs, sure, but he wasn't the defender, anywhere near the defender that Luis Robert Jr. should be. I mean, Juan Lagares, he get you excited? Angel Pagan? I mean, come on, think about the Mets having to play Jeff McNeil in center field was an embarrassment. Matter of fact, I like the addition of Jose Siri a year ago, basically saying the same thing, but just on a much lower level. Siri was a 189 hitter. He was a buck hitter, not 200. So I'll take 220, 260, whatever, Robert, plus the 20 steals, plus the potential with the power, plus the Gold Glove defense. So think of it as a much better version with a much higher ceiling than Jose Siri last year was a total bust. So at least the Mets should get some productivity out of center field with a more well-rounded lineup. Losing some power, clearly with Alonso and Nimmo being elsewhere, but I love this move for the Mets. The other part of this is that they clean up some of the glut of infielders. Luis Angel Acuna, now, Paulie, what's the hell is his name? I can't even write this down. Bada Booms, what is Paulie's name? Trayvon? I wrote it down. I can't read my handwriting. Do you know who the Mets traded? It's Paulie.
Giuliardi?
No, not him. A single A pitcher. I wrote it down. Look, you can't really read that.
Yeah, I'll get it for you.
Why can't I read my handwriting there? Anyway, Travion. I'm thinking Travion Henderson. Whatever. He's a single A.
Truman Paulie.
Truman. There you go. Truman. Yep. God, I got to really improve my hand. Truman Paulie. Either way. Truman Paulie, okay, single A pitcher, no big deal. Luis Angel Acuna, a prized possession that the Mets traded for in 2023 at the deadline, trading away Verlander, Scherzer, all those deals brought in those young guys, but it was a Billy Epler guy. And I liked Acuna. As a matter of fact, I loved Luis Angel Acuna because I love guys that play clean, hard-nosed defense, and that was him. But there's no room at the end for him. With the addition of Bichette, with the addition of Simeon, the Mets still have Beatty. Who knows what they're going to do with Vientos? Polanco in that infield. There's just no room. Jet Williams. There's just no room for Luis Angel Acuna. So he's down the depth chart. They exchanged one piece that just didn't fit and was never going to see the light of day. Plus, everybody's saying that he's a very light hitter. So he goes with Truman Paulie to the White Sox, and they get themselves a center fielder, which fits nicely. Now, as for the Bellinger part of it, you have to assume this 1,000% takes the Mets out of the mix for Bellinger. When I say Beltran, anyway, Bellinger. The part of Bellinger to the Mets has to be dead at this point. And I always thought he was a perfect fit for the Yankees anyway. Where is Beltran on my mind. I keep screwing that up. Where is Bellinger going that is a better fit than the Yankees? There were some reports that were saying the Blue Jays weren't interested to the level that they were in Kyle Tucker, so I wouldn't assume that they're a legitimate threat. The latest report before the Robert trade to the Mets, late Tuesday night, was that there were 4 teams in on Bellinger. The Mets, the Yankees, and 2 teams that were unnamed. Well, that means right now there's 3. The Mets are no longer in on Cody Bellinger. You do the math. Yankees and 2 other teams. And if one of those other teams was the Blue Jays, and who even knows if those teams are real until they're named. It could just be the agent, Scott Boras, trying to drum up the price. That's why I respect what the Yankees have done and think the Yankees have done the right thing here. Here's the deal. The 5 years, $130 million, whatever it was total, the 160 with opt-outs. I guess they went a little over the 130. That's it. Take it or leave it. And Bellinger's going to go back hat in hand. I mean, hat in hand, he's getting a mega deal for him especially, but the Yankees aren't caving to that, nor should they. And I firmly believe, I don't think this is one of those, well, there's always a mystery team out there. Like I felt that way years ago with Cano. I remember having this debate with Malusis on SNY. He's like, who's going to give him the money? And I'm like, there's always one team. And it turned out there was one team with the Mariners. I don't believe in this case, could be wrong, but I don't believe in this case that there is going to be one team that goes out there and all of a sudden blows Cody Bellinger away and screws the Yankees. Because I'll tell you this, As much as I think the Yankees are going to get Bellinger, and as much as I think Bellinger is a perfect fit, be both perfect for Bellinger and for the Yankees to retain him. If they don't get him, you know, I don't want them to overextend, but if they don't get him, what the hell is the Yankee lineup going to look like next year? I mean, the Yankees are going to have some work to do with guys coming off the board here. I'm not so sure how the Yankees can justify letting him go. But again, you got to be disciplined about it. You can't overextend and go to the lengths that you don't want to go to. If you think I think they're overpaying Bellinger anyway. I don't think he's worth what the Yankees are offering, but I understand why they're doing that. Any more than that to me would be ridiculous, even as badly as they need him. It'd just be nice if the Yankees maybe had a fallback option. And look, maybe they do that we're unaware of, but it certainly doesn't seem to be the case. And the fallback option just can't be, Spencer Jones, Jason Dominguez, we got Grisham in center. That's not good enough. Where the other teams, the Red Sox, the Orioles, the Blue Jays, all making big moves this offseason, Yankees are going to have to step up to the plate a little bit here. And you're starting to see the action come in now as we're a couple of weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting. The Mets finally starting to build a team this offseason. Still have a long way to go with the pitching, the starting pitching. The Yankees have kind of just been sitting on their hands, kind of waiting this thing out and maybe thinking that they're okay. Maybe there were some moves that they thought they could get on. There was talks about trading Jazz. That hasn't happened. They were flirting with Bichette, I guess, flirting with some others. And Bellinger's been the primary focus. I would be stunned ultimately, especially now, because I think there was fear. And I got to be honest with you, it does make me excited from a Met fan perspective. I think there was fear that because the Mets and King Cohen didn't get Kyle Tucker, that he was going to go swoop in and steal Bellinger away. Some people were excited about it. Bada booms, I showed you the text from my Uncle John, who's a diehard Yankee fan. I got to pull it up. I think I deleted it. I'm a text deleter. He's a diehard Yankee fan. Yeah, I'm going to read you the text here. My Uncle John, he's nut job, total nut job. Come on, bro. This is how he talks. Come on, bro. This is the text. I'm reading you the text exactly. Come on, bro. Could you call Cohen and tell him to get this effing jerk off Bellinger? This is Uncle John's words, not mine. I got the text right here. I'll show it to you. Get this effing jerk off Bellinger. Mets need him bad. Give him $35 million a year or 3 years or the second year opt out. Please get rid of this effing jerk off. Yankees do not need him. That's Uncle John, the Yankee fan. Now, I would disagree with Uncle John. I don't know why you would be so vulgar, Uncle John, in calling Bellinger that. But I also disagree the Yankees need him. Now, the one thing that I would say is that I don't think this contract will age well. But I don't worry about that. Like, even with the LeMahieu thing, it got to a point where the Yankees should have just paid LeMahieu to go away. You knew it was over. Let him go away, and they hung on for dear life. If that happens with Bellinger, now maybe it doesn't. Maybe it does. I do get similar vibes for whatever reason. And I really wanted the Yankees to re-sign LeMahieu. He was an absolute stud. I mean, the machine. The batting average brought something different to the table. High contact guy, high average to balance out that power and strikeout that the Yankees had in that lineup. So I love the idea of LeMahieu bringing him back and couldn't knock it at the time. But obviously it got to a point, 2-3 years to go on the deal. They should have just moved on. And maybe that's something that they'll have to think about doing with Bellinger. But I can't worry about that now. They need him back and should be in a better position to get him back with the Mets no longer lurking. Although I never really thought, look, if the Mets wanted him, they would have gotten him by now. If they wanted him, they would have gotten him, just like they did with Soto, just like they did with Bichette. They would have gone over the top, paid him $45 million a year, brought him in for 3 years, and that's it. End of story. They didn't want him. They didn't want him badly enough. And maybe the Yankees get him at their price, and I expect that will be the case. All right, let's get to some football. And by the way, we'll do much more on Bellinger whenever, in fact, he does decide, as the baseball world is waiting on Cody Bellinger. Like, make a freaking decision, dude. Come on. We all know what's going to happen. You're going back to the Yankees. What's the holdup here? We got podcasts to do.